Hello, everybody, brothers and sisters in Christ. Welcome back to Armenian Orthodox Nation. I'm very pleased to present today part two of my interview with my spiritual father, Father Mesrop Ash of the Armenian Apostolic Orthodox Church. Today's topic is going to be one that I forgot to ask, actually, largely due to because we ran out of time during the day that we recorded part one of our interview. But as we went offline and ended that call, I was definitely frustrated with myself for not even remembering to ask this question or even bring it up. So we'll get into that for sure, because I think this is a very interesting topic that will actually be beneficial and edifying, eye-opening for lots of folks. In our last video, we covered your path to the priesthood, which in a diasporan context does make a lot of sense, but just in general with folks who are not well acquainted with our church might come across as fairly unique, being an American born priest who is ethnically Armenian, but born and raised in the United States. And some folks might still consider that a fairly unconventional path to the priesthood. What we did not cover in that first interview was your professional career prior to you going to seminary and eventually being ordained as a priest of our church. Now, if you were to visit the St. John Armenian Church YouTube channel, one of the oldest videos on the YouTube channel, this is Deder Mesrop's Parish, one of the oldest videos is a rip of a KTVU newscast. And the news anchor opens the segment by saying, a rare event in the Bay Area this morning as a Southern California man transitions from life in technology to priesthood. And it cuts to some clips as the news anchor narrates of Deder Mesrop's ordination to the priesthood in San Francisco. And the full video, by the way, of that is available online. It's on a different channel. Someone recorded the entire thing. I think it's maybe an hour long. I don't remember what channel that is, but I'll have it on screen. What the narrator says there is correct. Your career prior to the priesthood was in tech. And so, that leads to the obvious questions of, how on earth did that career shift happen? Because that is that's pretty drastic, right? So how did that come about?
Well, yeah, this is going to be fun, as I said, digging into this and kind of sharing with your audience what the role that, I don't want to say technology. That sounds almost like a dirty word these days, but the role that I guess software engineering or my relationship with the field of IT has played in my life from a very young age and until now. And the transition, as you say, from one to the other, which I think that's maybe initially where I'll jump in, and then we'll go back to the beginning. It may not have been fair to say that it was a transition, because I always had one foot in the church at all times in my adult life. There was never a time when I saw myself going full steam into a career of web development or software engineering, and then took a hard right into the church. As we kind of talked about, I think in our last session, I was, in my opinion, blessed to, from a very young age, have an intimate and healthy relationship with the church. Not one that always maybe necessitated or made it clear that my path would bring me to the priesthood, but one where I felt like from a very early age, I knew that the church was always going to play a significant role in my life. I think the question was, would it be a vocation, or would it be, just something that I do on the basis of being a volunteer, as so many passionate people serve this parish and all of our churches around the world. I think that while I was growing closer to the church, and even after the fact that I had made the decision to pursue the priesthood, simultaneously I was also developing in that other sector of my life. In a professional context, in as much as I was very often paid, whether as a freelancer or as an employee, to work in various fields of technology, beginning early on in systems admin, and then going into web development very significantly, in the late 90s and early 2000s, continuing on until very shortly before I went to seminary, being involved in a startup endeavor. Even though I was, a partner in the startup, I did that knowing that I was going to be going to seminary in the not distant future, and that this was something that I was doing to support the vision of a friend of mine, and also to apply myself. But let me go back to the beginning. I remember the first time that we got a computer, which, for a millennial like myself was a really big deal. The Oregon Trail generation remembers being incentivized to perform in school so that you could spend time in front of a computer during recess or after school to be able to play an educational game. That's a common experience. Mm-hmm. And I remember, and I came from a working class family, where luxuries were not by any means easily come by, and my parents working really hard and saving up to get our first computer. And at the time, I believe I was probably in junior high, and I remember my mom and dad brought the computer home. They set it up, and my mom worked in an office setting, so she had some experience with computers, so she was my first tutor, so to say, in the world of technology. And just kind of immediately having this feeling at that time in my life of adolescence, let's say like 11, 12 years old, something like that, where I sat down in front of this thing and I said, oh, I get this. This is my thing. Like, some kids have cultural talents, some kids have, athletic talents, some kids have these sort of quintessential parts of their skill sets and identities that make up who they are. And I just remember sitting down and having this big, sort of key turn and a lock unlock that was like, oh, this is your thing. You get this, and this is going to be a big part of who you are, which was, significant feeling for me at that time in my life. And it truly did become a big part of who I was, in the sense that, understanding and unlocking the tools that we have access to through technology, and leveraging those things, both just for the sake of intellectual curiosity, but also to be able to, apply them for real purpose, was just like something that just brought a lot of joy into my life. Being able to use the tools, of programming and of just, computer skills, I suppose, at that time. I mean, just being able to use a word processor sufficiently was like witchcraft in the mid 90s. Yeah. And it was very gratifying for me. By the time I got into high school, I remember, I think sophomore year, being able to take a computer skills class, and sitting down and kind of going through the initial rudimentary lessons that were being provided in that class, and having the teacher who was, I think, profoundly bored by having to teach this outdated material to kids that didn't care about computers, seeing that I had such strong affinity and aptitude and passion for that work, pulled me aside, and within a matter of months was working with me to start a pilot program for our school district to redesign the way that we taught computers to kids. And over the span of my career in high school, I was actually a staff member at my school, helping to design curriculum for our school district. And a couple friends of mine actually had an office at the school. And our whole job was to figure out how can we teach computers in an interesting way, and also in a applicable way, so that they could learn how these things matter in their daily lives, and how they can, utilize them in vocations. It's not a toy, but it's something that will help you, make a difference in the world, right? And at that point in my life, as I was kind of rounding out my high school career, I was certain that I was going down the engineering path, because of, the idea that this was already something so super significant to my life. While, as I said, at the same time, I was still fully rooted in my role as a child of the Armenian Church and super active in our youth ministries and, probably equally, if not more so, giving of my time and attention there. But then those things start to bleed together as you realize I could take these skills and I could use them in this other sphere. By the late 90s, my friends and I were learning web development. I was doing that both later on as an employee of the school district, where I was designing their first website, and then also for our youth organization, for the ACYO, for the Western Diocese. We were building the first website for that organization, and realizing, this is a really satisfying synergy for me to be able to take, this power that I have in this one area, in this one aspect of knowledge and technology, and to be able to use that to empower my church and to build up the church and strengthen it and to spread the message and get other people involved and engaged. It was just really my niche. That's where I really felt like I was effective, and I felt super satisfied with what it was that I could offer. While at the same time, I was growing in other roles in the church as a leader, as a deacon, as a preacher. And, these things were, simultaneously growing in importance in my life. And then eventually, post high school, trying to determine what direction I wanted to go in, I decided that I didn't want to take the path to engineering academically, because I felt like I was being pulled more towards a vocation in the church. And eventually, as we spoke about, I was called to serve in the church by our diocesan primate when he asked me, would you like to be a priest? And I realized in a way that, superseded that moment that I had as an adolescent in front of a computer screen of oh no, this is my thing. This is the thing that is really, what I'm meant to be doing. And then, that became my focus, of course, eventually leading to seminary and then to the ordination. But still having, this, I think, intense interest of learning how to leverage technology to be able to spread the word of Christ. Eventually, as I said, I would go on to be a freelancer, working, on a contractual basis to design websites. And then be involved in the startup endeavor that I referred to in the news piece that you were speaking about. But as I've proceeded to fully wear the clothes of the servant of Christ and to be completely ensconced in the responsibilities of parish priesthood, I've frequently, maybe often more than is completely necessary, brought that tool set that I had from, my youth into my work today, asking the question, how can we use technology to, benefit the mission and ministry of the Armenian Apostolic Church? And you can see that here in our parish. We have apps that we use to share various translations of the liturgies in the church. And the app that we're building now, Fast and Pray app, and with our website, eventually I did design the diocese's first website and second website, and I'm working with them now, in later iterations, and in every little thing that we do. And it's been really beneficial for me because we, obviously are living in a time right now where with the advent of mobile devices, these things are intrinsic to how we interact with the world around us, for better or for worse. So those, the synergistic development of those two aspects of my life have really complemented one another in a way that I would have never expected when I was younger and I sat down in front of a computer and said, oh, this is my thing. I never imagined that was the passion that Christ put in my heart, because later on it would be super integral to my own ministry in the Armenian Church in a way that is necessary today, and somewhat unique. And I'm very grateful for that. But I want to take a step back from it and kind of maybe focus more on I think was really at the heart of our conversation that brought us to this episode today, which was, I'm not the only person in the world that shares those two passions, which is, to have a sense that how the frameworks and concepts that underpin modern technology, or at least computer science today, also somehow resonate on a similar wavelength with how my faith within the context of orthodoxy does as well. And to kind of unpack, what does that mean to have those things overlapping and resonating with each other, and what does it tell us about our faith, right?
Yeah. So the follow-up question to that was, the conversation we had a while ago. I came to you with just an observation that I found, curious, knowing your background, and this was sort of the impetus for this video idea. It's that I happen to know a good amount, actually, of brothers in Christ who are also in the programming, software developing sphere, specifically that type of programming, which is really fascinating to me as a complete outsider to the tech world. And when I say brothers in Christ, I don't just mean Christians in general. I mean specifically Oriental Orthodox. I know there are a few of your parishioners at your church who are also in the tech world. I happen to have friends who are Coptic Orthodox, Syriac Orthodox, who are also into that sort of career path. And even though I'm a young person, a younger adult, I consider myself a total boomer when it comes to computers, and I get overly frustrated at computers all the time, and just not being of that sort of mind and not having that sort of just natural inclination towards that topic and this realm in general. I am just very curious to hear your perspective as to what the connection there might be. What is it about programming that might also lend itself to an interest in Christian theology, and even the path to serving the church itself? If there is sort of, maybe does software development build people who would then have an interest in theology, or do you think it is sort of like a type of thought process, like a type of an ingrained system of thinking that some people have and some don't, that leads itself to have an interest in both categories, even though they are seemingly very different? What's your opinion on that, and what's your experience been also interacting with other Christians who have a similar background?
Right. No, for sure. These people are my people, for sure. And I could tell them from across the room. They're not, and it may not be the majority of our faithful by any means, but for those of us that I think see how the pieces click together, I see a kindred spirit. And there are certainly several in our church and, in our sister churches as well. And I think there would be many others also, given a certain degree of mutual exposure, meaning I think there are a lot of folks out there that feel that sense of gratification and satisfaction when applying themselves to, the structured, logical, rational approach that's necessary to be able to succeed in software engineering, or in any engineering field for that matter. I think we're talking about working with structures here that are ordered. And then do they have the necessary catechesis or exposure, introduction, or education to orthodoxy, Oriental Orthodoxy, to understand where that resonant point is? You have to have both. You have to be able to get this and get this. And when you get both of those things, you see, this is how they fit together. And it's not a trivial process bringing you to a sufficient degree of awareness in both areas of life. But like I said, I think many people that are there, it's clear as day that, the mentality, the worldview, or on a spiritual level, I want to use that word resonance again, where you see the sense of satisfaction when things work together in an ordered, systematic way, you feel like, oh, there's something in me that is desiring to take all of these pieces that I know should and could work together, and to find out where do they all belong in their most optimal way so as to maximize the effect and the impact. You know that this isn't this is an organic world that we live in, for sure. It's a living world, it's a breathing world, it's a created world, but we also know that it's not chaotic, right? It's not unjust. Like, there's an order to it, and that order is often unapparent, and sometimes trying to uncover that order is very frustrating. When we see the chaotic world that we live in today, and people have lived in throughout the history of humanity at various times, it feels like this is a disordered world. This is an unjust world. But there's something in you that says it's not supposed to be that way, or at least there's a part of this picture that I'm not getting or not seeing right now that I have to discover in order to make the connections that are necessary to understand, how is the world supposed to work? How is it working in the way that I'm meant to understand that it's working? And I think the engineering mind, I think the developer's mind, the coder's mind is often concerned with the same questions. I'm sitting down in front of a blank screen. I know I've got all the pieces available to me to create the thing that I want to create. How do I put it all together? It's the co-creative process here that I think is very important. I'm not sitting down and inventing the computer and, assembly and processors and everything else. I'm not doing everything from scratch. But much has been created, yes, by ingenuity of humankind, for sure, over time. But we have this, at any given time, this apex expression of technology in front of us. And I know that I can bring those pieces together in a co-creative way such that I can be part of, bringing into the experiential, life of people this thing that needs to happen. Maybe it's a business logic application, maybe it's a website, maybe it's a whatever you might be building in this area. But whatever it is, I'm going to find the optimal place for all of these pieces to work together in a harmonious way. And I'm going to do whatever I can to try to make it elegant and clean and accessible and available. And I'm going to be part of that. Okay. And it feels so, it's like a powerful experience, but also like, it's just like when all the pieces fit together just right, you have this kind of, that's so nice. That's so good. And I have that experience with Orthodoxy also, in life, in my place in the world and in my relationships with people, in my understanding of our time and our place in the, economy of salvation, in the history of the world and in its future. For me, Orthodoxy provides essential and foundational blocks of understanding that are necessary to be understood and to be applied, and also put into proper perspective so that you can look at the world that you're living in right now. I look at the world that I'm living in right now, and I have moments of just deep and utter satisfaction and inner peace when I see the elegance of how all of this works together according to God's plan. And I also am engaged in that co-creative process. I am not bringing into existence, all of the things that are needed to live a satisfactory life, but all of these things are here. And if I can put them together in an optimal way and in an ordered way, then I can be working with God's creation in a way that, like, I'm fulfilling my purpose and I'm contributing to the world that I'm in. And it just feels so complete. And somehow in my spiritual life and in my life as a coder or technologist, like, I'm pursuing those same feelings and I'm finding similar sorts of satisfaction, and I'm realizing they're not distinct, but they're part of that same inner drive that's in me to want to be part of a non-chaotic world, to be part of a world that's purposeful and ordered, and part of a greater plan.
It is almost like, as a really basic metaphor, kind of like solving a really, really complex puzzle and just figuring out how it all works. And that actually, like, I've even sent you some examples of some of my friends in Orthodoxy who are also, in programming. I've shown you examples of, such a big topic is Christology. And I've seen some of my friends have made like these really, well done flow charts explaining Christology and other theological concepts that are, they look like something that a software engineer would develop. And I do think, there is something to be said about taking that mindset and applying it towards the Christian message and sort of how God functions in our life. One other topic that I'd like to talk about related to this is accessibility. A big theme of this channel is accessibility, making it easier for the faithful to access the story of our church and to learn more about what we believe and what our history is, how to properly defend the faith, and for those who are not part of the church, how they can access it too. And as I have said a few times, and kind of bluntly, sort of the theme is no excuses. So there's no, if someone's Armenian and they were born and raised in the church, but they say, I'm not getting this out of church. I don't understand why this is happening or what this means, and so I'm going to look for answers elsewhere. There's now an answer for that. Or if someone is outside the church and they say, I'm interested in Orthodoxy and the Armenian church specifically, but I went online and there was nothing there or something like that, or I don't understand the language, so how can I possibly come to any sort of understanding or attachment to this? Making it as easy as possible for them to encounter the message of our church. And something that you have done consistently throughout your ministry, as long as I've known you, is you have applied your skill set to your ministry. That is evident all over your projects with St. John Armenian Church, whether it was live streams during the pandemic. One big notable example is you've had translations running during the Divine Liturgy of the Armenian Church that display in English what's being said, and concurrently, like through a phone, it updates. So as the liturgy is happening, people can read along as it is happening. You've updated that since very recently to where it now even has transliterations. So people, even if they don't understand Armenian, can attempt to pronounce the words during the chants and other sections of our liturgy. And speaking as someone who is a member of the church but initially approached it having no knowledge of the Armenian language, and I'm still learning, it's still very much a work in progress to this day, having access to the transliteration specifically is so powerful in just acquainting oneself with the liturgy. So with that in mind, the theme of accessibility, how do you see this area of tech development impacting the church and fueling its evangelism, to use a term, in the coming years? What do you think? You don't have to go into specifics either about projects you've been involved in, but how do you see that being utilized by our church to get our message out there and make it more accessible? Because that's such an important topic right now.
It's a great question. And it's a question that touches on, an important area that the church needs to be engaged in today, and one in which we need the support of, I think, some of the kindred spirits that we're speaking about in this video right now, which is exploring areas of innovation. Innovation in the church in general, in Orthodoxy, it's important because there's reformation, there's innovation, And they're not the same thing. Orthodoxy has as its primary pillars not only sacred scripture. Of course, we hold the word of the Bible to be the ineffable expression of God's revelation, but we also have sacred tradition. Sacred tradition, with a capital T, is about holding holy the teachings of the early church, from the apostolic era on, and holding that side by side, parallel with the authority of the Bible, means that there are certain things that we have to stay true to as Orthodox Christians. Like when we're talking about like that sense of understanding and satisfaction of, why things work the way that they do, having a sense of sacred tradition and why that's an important component in why a church like ours is the way that it is like such a big piece of that puzzle and understanding how it works. But Orthodoxy, while keeping true to sacred tradition, is also meant to express itself in its contemporary setting, right? And that is in fact a challenging balance that we all, and throughout history, we have had to have found, such that we do not in any way break away from sacred tradition, but we find the way to make it accessible to the people of our church today, so that throughout time we can, become members of the infinite body of Christ. Whether it was 50 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, or 500 years from now, we all need to be part of that same body. And, as the world continues to change, then the way that we find ourselves to be part of that body is naturally going to shift in its expression. And I think that's where innovation is really important. Reformation is hard in the Orthodox Church because it has to be. It's kind of built into our DNA. We can't change from day to day, because the more rapidly that we change, then the more quickly that we find ourselves being distanced from that sacred tradition. Change is good, and it needs to happen in its own time, but it's never going to happen easily or quickly in the Orthodox Church. But innovation is about finding new ways to accomplish our goals. And I have found technology to be just like a really fertile ground for us to consider areas of innovation. And recently you mentioned, one of the ways that we've been pursuing that here. And I'll just give you an example of my approach to that, which was being a parish priest, in a kind of touristic venue, I suppose, which is San Francisco. It would not be uncommon for me on a given Sunday morning to turn around and to see a new face in the parish. They may not be a new community member. They might be somebody who recently moved here or somebody who's visiting here. Anyway, to turn around and see somebody that I hadn't seen before, and to not be able to assume anything about what they knew about the Armenian Church. This might be the first time they've ever set foot in an Armenian church. Maybe it's the 1,000th time. Maybe they speak Armenian, maybe they don't. Maybe they don't speak English either. Who knows where they're from or what they know, but somehow, they have found themselves walking into this Armenian church on a given Sunday morning. And I can't assume that they know a single thing about what's going on in that church and why. And if in the course of that liturgy I see them leave, I'm left wondering, what did they know? What did they learn? What did they get? And I can't guarantee any of that, even with the pew book being available to them. And so asking the question of, what would be the easiest and most straightforward way to kind of zap that information into their brain? If they were coming from nothing. And that's where Tarkman came from. And there are many churches around the world today that are using projection screens, for example, to share PowerPoints of like translation. I think all those efforts are fantastic, but I wanted to take a more innovative approach to this, which is to give people access to the information that they wanted to see. So and in the most straightforward way possible, so that when you open the app or even when you see it on the screen, you're going to see only what's going on at that moment in time, right? So that you're not going to have to figure out where you are. But on your phone, you're going to see all the parts, but you're going to be scrolled immediately to the place that you are in the service, so you can find out the context of that part. Are we halfway through? Are we towards the end? Are we at the beginning? What came before? What came after? But I'm going to make sure they're seeing what's going on right now. and then to see it in the language you want to see it. Right now, that's either English, classical Armenian, transliterated Armenian, or Russian. But the framework is there for it to be in any given language: Western Armenian, Eastern Armenian, Spanish, French, what have you. And then also simultaneously to be able to understand what's going on by having access to explanations. So like our app has a question mark button on it that you can click at any time, and it's going to show you some text about what's going on right now and why it's happening. So, that was the vision that I had anyway 10 years ago, and I've been, kind of chipping away at it for the last 10 years, and it's functional. But that's the kind of approach that I feel like is necessary in the church today, to say, well, we have a challenge, and how can we use these new tools to be able to really kind of make a difference in terms of improving things, and not asking ourselves, how do we change the church? But how do we leverage the tools that we have in order to make the church more accessible to our people? And we've been doing that recently with Fast and Pray 2, which we're really excited about, and is going to be published in the App Store soon. But so exciting because, again, asking the question, how do we restore our essential fasting practices to the common member of the church? That's a huge cultural shift for a lot of people. How do we do that? And is it by constantly preaching about it on Sunday morning? I don't think that's really going to, move the ball there. But there's got to be some other approach. And so, we have found, apps in the model of the positive habit developing vein that you might see in other areas, to be able to help habitualize fasting and prayer in people's life to be a potentially effective approach. And again, that's technology. So I think for my kindred spirits out there who find resonation in technology and in the church, there's a really fertile missionary field there to ask ourselves, how can we be pushing the envelope here to really get the most out of the tools that we have available to us to help spread the message of the church.
Yeah, so with that being established, actually, you just mentioned in your answer two of the applications that you have worked on as a priest, one being a bit older and one more recent. How about you tell us a bit more about specifically church-related applications and projects you've been involved in? Sure. I think it would be good while we're here. I mean, might as well do a plug for Fast and Pray. I have a bit of experience with that as well, and elaborate on what's going on there. That is a project you were working on with one of your deacons, who is one of the individuals I alluded to, who is an Orthodox Christian, but is also in the programming world. And then also, I think it would be helpful to let folks know any other applications you've used that are church related that have been developed by other people that have helped inform your ministry. So let's look into that a bit.
Yeah. Well, I guess going back, some of the projects that I was involved in, I was happy with. Like I said, I was kind of an early contributor in a lot of the online presences of, at least in our diocesan sphere, many of our institutions. These days, I can't be actively involved in a lot of those just because I have so many responsibilities as a parish priest. But like I said, in my capacity as a employee, as a deacon at the Western Diocese, I did a lot of work to build and maintain their site for over 10 years. This was in a previous iteration than the one that it is now. But it was kind of a milestone for when it was published. I published an early online version of the Oratsuits, which is the lectionary of the Armenian Church. We have a few apps available to us today. At the time, we didn't have any. And I had published an early version of the lectionary that I was very proud of. This was going back about 15 years ago. And there are many other people, I think, that are active in the publishing sphere in terms of getting information up and online, particularly going back 20 and 30 years, that were definitely in that innovative space. Like Tom Samuelian comes to mind, or Father Vascan Movsesian. They worked really hard to get as much information out there, especially in those early days, because they saw the need and the necessity of it. But I think we're looking for soldiers who can be out there today on the front lines and wondering how we can get that message out in new formats and on new platforms. And yeah, those are some of the projects. I think here at our parish, I'm also, proud of the website, and frankly, that we had has been a pretty effective tool for us. We often have other parishes reach out to us for insight and support regarding their web presence. If you go to web.fastandpray.app right now, you can register. Like I said, we're still kind of technically pre-launch, or we're soft launch. The app is fully functional, but it will be on the App Store soon. That's been a learning process for us of crossing T's and dotting I's in a way that has been quite tedious, but it's been helpful. And what Fast and Pray is all about is, when you join the app, you're going to learn about the various periods of fasting that we have in the Armenian Apostolic Church, and why those are so crucial and essential to developing a discipline of bodily and spiritual wellness in your life. And you'll be able to join those fasts, meaning to say that you are or will be participating in them along with people from around the world. And notified of when those fasts begin. Aside from Great Lent, there are many other periods of fasting and also weekly fasts that take place in the Orthodox Church. And you'll learn how to fast, when to fast, why to fast. But also, in addition to that, there's a whole series of healthy spiritual practices that are built into the fasting experience of the app. During a fasting period, you'll be able to join, and you'll see your daily checklist that will include your morning and evening prayers. Morning and evening prayers are accompanied by guided meditations and also prayer rituals that you can participate in from your home. Reminders to do good and charitable works. Scriptural readings, actually daily. You can see the readings of the Holy Church according to its lectionary. We actually are working with another great app developed by Orthodox brothers over at Catena, Catena,
very popular,
where you can open up the app and find commentary for any given verse in the Bible according to the Church Fathers. So our app is integrated with that. So you'll see our lectionary readings in the Catena context. And so it's just going to kind of make it dead simple for you to submit yourself to this really transformative and healthy discipline. In the tech world, there's this phrase called dog fooding, it means that when you're creating something, you use it, and the more you are likely to use the thing that you create, then the better the product will be, and probably the more likely there will be, a market for it. Well, I could say for us that have been building it out, we use it every day. We love it. It's actually something that's enhanced my own spirituality and my own personal discipline, and I'm really excited to share it with the world. So that's something that we're excited to have come out. But like I said, I think it wasn't my intention, but I'm kind of calling out to everybody and saying, do you have ideas of things like this? Yeah. Is there some aspect of the Armenian Church that you feel like you wish other people could enjoy with you or appreciate the way that you do? These skills that we have as IT professionals are really essential tools that we can use to help share those things with the world. And there are evangelism, as you said, Grant. They're the new platform for our evangelism. And people, they need and appreciate these efforts. It's a lot of work, don't get me wrong. Yeah. I don't typically spend my 9 to 5 coding. That's what I do at home or in the middle of the night or when I'm traveling. So it's all extra, it's all a lot, but it also helps us understand our own spirituality better. I think that's certainly one thing. Like I said, I built that lectionary app many years ago. I built that up to share lectionary readings with the world, because at that time you can only get them in like little booklets that you find here and there, but also so that I can understand the church calendar better. And by building it, I realize, and I've always known this, the more that I'm understanding the subject matter better to be able to present it to others, then the better that the more I've become a more astute student of that material. So it can be part of your own spiritual development and maturation to be able to take on an area of church life and say, I want to master this, and I want to figure out how I can, build tools that will make it more accessible to people who share my faith. One other thing that I wanted to mention that kind of relates back to, I think, the general topic that we were discussing earlier, just about that, the synergy between, an engineering mindset and orthodoxy, which is something that our church fathers often reflected about, which is the gift of the rational mind. The essential component of the co-creative capability of humanity, and also their ability to be able to understand the revelation of God, like this really key ingredient that we have as being created in the image of God, is that we have the rational mind that allows us to be able to pursue these thoughts and these concerns, to look at the world and say, like, what am I missing? And, to ask ourselves, to be curious and to wonder, what can I find, through my exploration and through my study that's going to be able to allow me to understand existence better, and for us to, discover what's already deeply rooted in our hearts, which is the love of God. And that same rationality, it can be used in a myriad of different ways, and this is one of them. And I think when we find the way to use our rational mind to know and to love God, and also apply it in this vocational way, whether it's in IT, engineering, or in some other capacity, it's just, this is why I do what I do, because it makes me feel good doing it. Like, that's like where I really find my joy. And I think that's something that we could all access as well, if we find the space where these things overlap.
Yeah, agreed. I totally agreed. As I alluded to earlier, I am not a tech-minded person whatsoever. So anything exploring this topic is going to be interesting to me, because I look at software as wizardry almost. It's like I just don't get it. So any exploration of this topic is fascinating, and I'd be very eager actually to hear their perspective of other Orthodox Christians who have a similar background, and I'd like to know how their background informs their faith and any other projects they might be working on. But this is something that, the church needs to invest in, because, we live in a world now where the lines are being increasingly blurred between the digital realm and the physical realm, more and more each day, oftentimes to alarming degrees. But there are still avenues that are positive avenues, that are important for us to take advantage of in terms of getting our message out to folks. We can't be total Luddites about technology when nowadays so many people have what's basically a supercomputer in their pocket. That a mere 60 years ago, the computing power of your average iPhone was inconceivable, and it's not something that we can avoid if we are going to reach people and deliver the message of Jesus Christ. So even though it's not a realm that I know much about, it is one that I am very eager to learn more about. I think a future video topic for sure is the use of social media and online content for sure, because I do have commentary on that. I don't have a lot of experience with technology, but I do have a lot of experience with social media, just being my age. As far as one last little bit here, what is something that maybe if someone's watching and they have they think this is something that in the future they would want to do. What's a way that they can approach it in a safe and orthodox way? What is something that, trying to phrase it here, but what's a good way that you think a Christian should approach this world professionally?
Are we talking about this synergy between orthodoxy and technology? Or are we talking about just a person who's working in an IT field, and how would they be, what things should they be aware of as an Orthodox in that sector?
Frankly, both. Actually, those are both pretty applicable to the question I asked. I know it was kind of open-ended.
Yeah, I think let me talk about the first one first.
Sure.
And not that this is a rampant problem, but I will say, like, in general, I feel like when we have lay people with, what's the word? Like specialized knowledge and professional experience, whether it be in IT or in the humanities or whatever, art, architecture, and they want to apply themselves for the sake of their spirituality. Let's imagine an architect who wants to build a church, or a coder who wants to build an app, or an artist who wants to, paint an icon. I think it's always a healthy exercise to reach out to your clergy person in the pursuit of that endeavor. I'm not saying that you need them to sign off on everything that you're doing because it involves the church or Christ. We're not here to gatekeep that, quote unquote. Express yourself in art as a Christian however you need to express yourself. Like as a Christian in the world, you need to be producing and let your faith guide you and let that bring goodness and light into the world. But I think if part of our goal is for that to be associated with the mission and ministry of the church, then, talk to your clergyman about it and get his perspective as an insight, his referral for content and information. Because sometimes I do see people pursue efforts. You and I have spoken about this recently in terms of like unauthorized translations and these sorts of things, that it's for a passion and love for Christ and the church that people are doing this, but they may not often have the context to understand if they are misunderstanding, misinterpreting, or misrepresenting the content that may have consequences, right? So we're not here to put our fingers in the pie or to, I think, disturb anybody's passion or their mission, but it's good to just sit down and get the insight of a trusted clergyman to understand, if I want to make this app about, sharagans or hymns or something like that, well, that's great. You should do that. And if your priest probably isn't like me and knows how to pair program it with you, at least get some insight from him about what would be important to include and maybe, how to structure it or present it. So I think that's important. And, some of the concepts of modern software development, I think are great for this, like, open source, code, and using things like GitHub and public repositories to be able to make your development open and available to the world and to receive comments about it from others. At that point, at least we could see what you're doing or what you're working on and give feedback or comment on it if you're open to that, particular to coding, that is. So I think that's important. Or if you are a developer and you just want to know how you can help out, I've got a lot of work, so call me. I'll give you something to do. But there are other areas that I know you could, every diocese needs a website, every church needs help, managing their website. That sort of stuff is
always work to be done.
Everybody's looking for help. But on the other end of things, you're a professional. You're working in the IT sphere, doing whatever, data architecture, machine learning, AI, I don't know what. You're doing something. We've got a ton of them here in the Bay Area. And you're also a believer, and you associate with the Armenian Apostolic Church. And unfortunately, like testimonies like mine, they're not super common, I'll be honest. And I think people may feel somewhat isolated or different because they feel like somehow, I'm sure that they're working in a predominantly agnostic or atheistic work environment, unfortunately. So I would say, like, one thing is you should know that these things coexist and thrive, which is an ardent faith life and an engineering mind. And not just me, but many other people out there find a lot of satisfaction in pursuing both areas of life. And I think that you can live your faith in your professional sphere. I think the ethics and morals that you bring to the table as a Christian, as a member of the Armenian Apostolic Church, is essential and valuable to whatever field that you find yourself working in. And also, I think that, and this is something that, as I've spoken to many people, seasoned professionals and young people also working in IT in the Bay Area, is it can often feel, what's the word I want to use? It can feel like a pursuit that is lacking in meaning and purpose. As much as, contemporary businesses often speak of vision and values, right? And everything is transformative and everything is changing the world and making the world a better place. When you get down to it, business life, it can often be difficult to find your sense of belonging and your sense of purpose in life, which we know God has bestowed upon each and every one of us. And being able to be supported and supplemented by your role as a child of God is really beneficial and supportive. If that's something that you are actively involved in, I think that's great. It's going to empower you. If it's something you're considering, then again, reach out to a clergyman like myself and ask, how can my life as a Christian, as a member of the Armenian Apostolic Church, be enhanced, such that I can bring the fullness of that experience into my work life, and also potentially vice versa, as we've been talking about on this call.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I thank you so much for your time. This is a total of over 2 hours we've spent recording, discussing your life and your path to the priesthood. And so I believe many people will find it edifying because, as I've said, your path to the priesthood is a very modern one, and one that some folks, for whatever reason, whatever their preconceived notions of orthodoxy and the priesthood might be, they might consider it, unconventional or intriguing for any reason. And I think your message is an important one to show that even in specifically relevant to Orthodoxy and the Armenian Church, being raised outside of Armenia, not having, perhaps as much cultural exposure to Armenianness that some folks might consider like a prerequisite to be Armenian, it ultimately does not it does not have to affect one's relationship with the church, and it shouldn't really. Coming from someone who doesn't have like a direct one-to-one, of course, parallel journey to the church as you, but a fairly similar one in many reasons. That's why I knew your story was so important to highlight and could really assist many people on their own journey. And so, I thank you for taking the time with me to, film these videos and discuss this project and other projects, and being almost like an advisor sort of to Armenian Orthodox Nation in, the year plus that it's been around. And just thank you so much for your story and your participation. And I'm eager to see what else we can do going forward. And if there's any other, words of advice maybe you'd like to have, like to say for the audience.
I think actually Armenian Orthodox Nation is a perfect example of what we've been talking about. It's about identifying an area of life where it's like, I want to get in there, I want to make a difference. I've got this skill set. I know these things. I want to share that with the world. And that I'm 100% behind that. So I think this is perfectly aligned with what we've been talking about today. And I want to thank you for the opportunity today to ramble on about my youth,
Yeah.
to share that with anybody who might be interested in it. But I would say I'm excited for any other future episode that I'm going to be able to contribute to. And I'm excited to learn more about your audience and to share with your audience all of these exciting topics that we've already discussed that I think are touching on really important contemporary issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the responses to this video in particular will be interesting. I'm interested to read others' experiences and opinions on this topic specifically because, as I've said now several times, there are plenty of others in the Oriental Orthodox diaspora, not just the global church, but the diaspora specifically, who are working in similar projects. And I think if we talk about collaboration and the total collective brain power that's there, I mean, there's a lot that can be done, and a lot of really, really great stuff and great projects in store. And so always keeping an air of optimism here. That's one thing about Armenian Orthodox Nation is we're going to be optimistic. There's no pessimism on this channel and on this project.
There's no time for that. There's enough pessimism. Optimism is what we need. And I guess the third thing here would be, I guess we've talked about people who are in IT that want to be living a Christian life, people who who are Christian programmers who want to be applying themselves in the church. There's another one here, which is if anybody like me is a programmer that wants to become a priest, then Grant, you could put my office phone number in big letters on the screen and have them call me.
Yeah.
We'll talk about next steps.
For sure, yeah. Link in the description. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. If you are in tech and you want to become a priest, I literally can't imagine a better person to talk to than Mesrop.
You got to talk to me. I'm the one.
Exactly.
Call me.
He's the guy. All right. Thank you, Dedhar, so much. I will talk to you again
God
very
bless
soon.
you.
God bless you.